Hey guys, so I'm here with the Apex Power Steering Boost Kit that I finally ordered and got. I ordered it last week, got it in on Friday, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it before I install it, honestly. And yeah, so this is from Apex Designs USA, or Apex Performance. They just recently released the Power Steering Boost Kit. I want to say maybe, I know they debuted it in Easter Jeep Safari. They've already had their oil cooler out for some time now. I think about a year. But their boost kit is brand new, and what it does is it's going to boost the pressure of your electronic steering pump. And as we know, we have on the JLs, we have an electronic steering pump with hydraulic fluid. And what I've noticed is one of the things that kind of worried me was when I went to 35s, the moment I added the heavy tires and wheels, I did notice that the steering pump started to whine more. Obviously it's being worked more than what it was from factory. I had, since I'm a sport, I had 31 street tires, 31 inch tall street tires, which honestly didn't weigh anything, so obviously the electronic steering pump has no problem running that. But the moment you go to a heavier rim, heavier tire, it's a lot more movement the steering pump has to do. So one of the things Apex came out with is this actual boost kit that's right here, and what it does is it actually allows you to increase the boost pressure of your power steering pump, and that allows you to now be able to run bigger tires. It's going to be a lot smoother than what it is now for me anyways. It's going to allow me to, while I'm aired down and I'm out on the trails, the steering is going to be a lot easier for me. So it almost puts it back to what it was stock. So I just kind of want to give you an overview. This is the actual boost kit for it. It brings you this brand new, then it comes with the actual spring and everything for it. They supply a gauge because you're going to have to use the gauge to actually set the PSI, and they actually recommend anywhere between 1500 and 2000 PSI. The factory one, if I'm correct, runs anywhere between 1000 and 1300 PSI, something along those lines. And it's a pretty straightforward install, honestly. You just remove the low pressure line, you install the oil cooler right behind the winch or your bumper, right below your grill, and yeah. So they actually supply everything. They supply, honestly, all the hose that you're going to need to replace the low pressure line and everything. Just so you know, this does add, I believe it's about 0.9 or almost a liter of fluid for your power steering pump. Another thing was that we have very, very little hydraulic fluid in our system. I think it's like about 19 ounces or something along those lines. But it's very little. So when you're wheeling and you're doing a lot of hardcore rock crawling and all that, the steering fluid does get hot. And what that does is it actually ruins the viscosity of the fluid. It brings it down for you. That does is now your steering pump is working just as hard or harder now to actually keep your steering going. So that's why they came out with the oil cooler, which adds almost 150% or 0.9 liters of fluid, and that allows it to stay cooler. Your viscosity in your power steering fluid will stay the same or stay as close to it as possible, and it'll give you smoother steering. This in no way, from what I've read and seen, fixes the steering slop from the aluminum gearboxes. It does not fix that at all. This does help you with, while you're aired down, heavier tires, heavier wheels, being easier to move, the sticking of the tires when it's on a cold day, things like that. Now obviously I'm in Florida, so our cold days are 60 degrees. So I probably won't experience that unless I go up into the pretty much snow whenever it starts to snow again. So I don't really have that issue here in South Florida ever. So yeah, so I'm gonna kind of break away now. I'm gonna do some videos of the actual products. Honestly, Apex Performance, you guys already know I have their Autolinks disconnects, and their quality and craftsmanship is amazing. It really, really is amazing. The oil cooler, which you'll see now shortly in the video, it's built very, very strong. Since you do have to put it in a vulnerable place, they've made it very, very high impact and very, very heavy duty. It typically sits, if you have a winch, it's going to sit, it's going to sit between the frame rails on the front. So obviously we know rocks, debris, anything can hit it if you don't have a winch in front of it, or some other stuff, like the skid plates and things like that. So they made this very, very high resistant, but it also looks beautiful. They include all the torque specs actually etched on the side of all their parts, so you know what it should be set for. And that's really it. So I'll probably be installing this tomorrow, and I'll be doing a video for that. I know that Northridge 4x4 has a video of installing the boost kit, and it's a very good video. That's what I've pretty much watched repeatedly to make sure I knew exactly what I needed to do and everything that needed to get done. But I also wanted to record it for the everyday Joe that doesn't have a lift, doesn't have air tools, and that can do it. So that's really pretty much it. And yeah, so I just want to thank Apex for getting this out to me so quickly. You guys rock. And yeah, so stay tuned for the install video, and here's a few highlights of the product. Alright guys, so pretty much to install this, you need to remove your front bumper, front grille, winch if you have one, but obviously the initial removal of things is all going to be dependent on what you have. This main part is going to be different for everyone, because not everybody's going to have my same bumper, not everybody's going to have my same winch or fenders or lack of inner fenders. So in this case, kind of take what you can from it. If it helps you, great. Depending on what you have, at least it gives you a general idea of what you need to do to actually get it done. So we're actually going to start off by removing the front bumper and winch first. I don't have any inner fenders to remove since they are already out. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to decide on for inner fenders, but that's a whole different tangent, and I don't want to digress. So in reality, all I really have to remove is my front bumper, my winch, and my grill. So it makes it a lot easier for me because I don't have the inner fenders. If you have stock fenders, you will more than likely have to remove the fender with the inner fender well, which means those plastic clips, you're going to want to make sure that you get more of them because they will probably break off when you rip it off. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get started. All right, so once you have your bumper, your grill, and your winch out of the way, this is what you have. Now, you have to remove the airbox as well. So just completely remove it out of the way. I just left the air intake part right there. The airbox is in the trunk. You're actually going to have to remove this part right here because you need to cut this bracket. So we're going to take this off. And the way you take that off is by removing this hole right here. And the two screws are right there. So once you have that loose, you're now able to, it has a little grommet underneath. Just pop it up and just wiggle it through. Alright. So on the front side, this is currently our low pressure line. You can see it runs that way, and then it comes this way and connects into the steering box. This is coming from the power steering pump. This goes to the box. We have to actually cut this because this is not going to get reused at all. And we're going to have to remove this. You have one bolt here holding the bracket, one bolt here. We're going to go ahead and cut it right here just to pretty much drain the fluid out of it. So that's coming up. The oil cooler is actually going to sit in this channel right here behind the winch and in front of your AC condenser. All right. So all you need is a small little pipe cutter, honestly, and then just close it on up. So I'm going to do it right here because I am going to need to hold the cup underneath, and I just want to make sure this clears completely the AC. So I'm going to kind of get this in the way here. Now what might help, which I forgot to do, was actually opening the cap and removing it to allow air to get in, and that will allow the fluid to completely pour out. So just let it drain out, and once it's done draining out, then we can start moving on and removing this line completely altogether. So I don't know if you can see it, but the low pressure one has a clamp right here, the one that you're going to remove at the bottom of the power steering pump, and you can actually get to it from the top. So we're going to start with the power steering pump first. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to start by unclipping this harness. I'm going to gently pull up on that one. The actual harness has a red clip here, and the bottom one also has a red clip. You have to slide those back before you can actually remove it. They're a little bit hard, but you can pry them backwards with your hands without a problem. And then just push the clip down and wiggle it out. This is going to make it a lot easier for you when you go to spin the power steering pump around. Alright. And so with that out of the way, we'll just push that over to the side. So that way it's not being torn up or broken. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and remove these two bolts. This one right here, this one right here. It's a size 13 millimeter, so we're going to go ahead and get them cracking. There's the other. And now our power steering pump is completely loose, and we can move it around to do what we need to do. Alright, back up to the top. So let's go ahead and grab the clamp. Alright. Clamp is off, and now we can twist the line to pull it off. Like I said, since you just drained the system, there shouldn't be much of anything left. And so you're just going to unscrew this here, and then once you have that bolt loose, you can actually take it out by hand. Careful with the battery negative terminal, and now you see it's actually loose, so you can just let it be. Make sure your cap is on good. You don't want any little excess drops or whatever going and falling somewhere else. And now we are going to remove the bracket that holds these in. So just grab a 10 millimeter wrench. Finally, it's out. Alright, so this line is completely loose. Again, tight spot, so you're going to have to... We already know they're long bolts, so... And that's out. So, you can see it's completely loose. Alright, so now that you've completely removed both bolts, we're going to have to fish this out. So if you notice in here, it pretty much curves downwards and around. You have to fight it a little bit, but you can get it out. So, let's see. Oh, okay. So that's one thing I just noticed. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but there's an actual harness that's clipped onto it. You just got to push the pin up. It's one of those little U plastic clips that connects to it. And then we should be able to somehow get this to come out. Because the moment I bring it forward, it tends to... Now maybe if I could get it to spin downwards. Okay. So if you get it to rotate downwards, you'll actually be able to get that piece out, and then you just keep kind of rotating it to bring out the rest of it. And there you go. And that's really it. All right, so now that we got the bottom line out completely, it's no longer there. We can actually lift this up, as we're gonna have to move it out of the way. So you just kind of lift it, move it out of the way. We need to cut this, and literally all we're cutting is this edging here. We're running on the inside of this line and then coming back out and removing this edging. And the reason is because this piece here is actually going to go underneath this line, and it makes this line stick up higher, and it'll end up hitting this. So that's why you have to cut this piece out first. Based off of the directions from Apex, we're going to use a step drill to open this up here a lot bigger, and then we're going to go ahead and start cutting with the Sawzall. All right, I'm just going to cover this up because I don't want it getting anywhere near the condenser. We have the step drill bit, and we're going to make sure you're going forwards. And I just want to move this out of the way so that way it's not stopping me or preventing me. All right, it's a big enough hole. Now I'm going to use the hacksaw to cut along the inside here very carefully. All right, so let's go ahead and grab all this, fold it inwards so that way nothing gets out of it or falls out. Okay. Now I don't have a paint pen, but typically what you would do is just grab a regular paint pen and just kind of start coloring the edging here. I don't have that, so I'm going to use a can of Eastwood rust encapsulator, which will prevent it from rusting on me. I'm just going to really clean it up real good with the prep and then just spray it. Now what I'm going to do here, since I'm using a spray can, I'm going to spray from the top first, and then I'm going to spray from the bottom upwards. So we're just going to put that there. I'm going to hold this side so that way I know I'm only getting that part. All right. And then we're going to go on the bottom and spray upwards. better angle than that. All right. So just get a regular brush and pretty much just brush the edgings of it, making sure that you get anything, any small amount of dirt that might be there out of the way. So we're going to go ahead, pull the Teflon tape out, remove the nipple off, and we're just going to run some Teflon tape. I'd say maybe 2 or 3 passes all the way around. Should be more than enough. Obviously make sure the hole is not covered, because that's the last thing you want. And then we can screw it in. Alright. So once you've put it together, this is what it'll look like. You're going to have this one hose here, and then this fitting on the end actually will go into this end, right here. Alright, so it does have an O-ring, so you don't need to add Teflon tape to this. What I would say is make sure you lube the oil ring either with a light white lithium grease or with the same power steering fluid that you took out. Just take a dab, run it around the O-ring just to make sure it's wet, and then that's really it. So, all right, so since we have this built, I'm going to take you back to the car where we can install these two things. So what do we have to do next? We have to remove this high pressure line here, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to rotate it to get to the pressure spring on the bottom and the pressure bolt on the bottom. And then we'll come back and do this part last. Empty. So you're going to have to hold it since you don't have it bolted in. So once that's, you can actually take the bolt off. All right. Something along those lines just to be able to pop it up. And as you see there, it's coming up. And it's out. So the compressor itself still has a little bit of fluid in it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually put this right here while we rotate this completely to the other side, because you need to just make sure you don't get caught on your line, because you need to get to this bolt that's right here. All right, so it is going to be a T5 Allen key, and all you're going to do is just come in here and loosen it. So you're going to have to get the whole old spring out. Try to use something magnetic so you can actually pull it out. So this is the old spring, which we're not going to use anymore. And there's one additional piece that you need to get out because it needs to go in together and sit the right way. And that's the seat. So you need to have this taken out. These two things, you are not going to reuse them. You are going to keep this one because you're going to reuse this with the new Apex design. So what you want to do is Apex Design will ship this already backed out. Now, just in case they, for whatever reason, it gets by or whatnot, you want to make sure that this bolt on the inside, the pressure setter, is all the way backed out, that it's literally against the snap ring. The last thing you want is for this to be pushed in all the way inside. You install it, turn it on, and you have a massive increase of pressure that you did not expect, and it destroys your pump. So always make sure that this is backed out completely, 100% up against the actual snap ring, at least for the initial start. So one thing that you're going to want, this is the seat that you took out. This is actually going to go inside of this, and you're going to slide this all the way down. What I would say is this has an O-ring, so make sure you do lube it up, at least with either a light white lithium grease or the power steering fluid that you had that came out of here. Just take a drop of it and just run it along the O-ring. It's really just to make sure that it's sealed and it doesn't break the O-ring when you go to install it because it's dry. So we're going to go ahead and slide this in. Yes. So this takes 4 foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty much just going up until it's tight. It's a size 15 socket. And you're gonna go literally until it's pretty much just tight. It literally needs 4 foot-pounds of torque. I don't have a torque wrench that goes that low, but 4 foot-pounds is almost nothing. So literally that and maybe a slight tug, and that's it. So we're gonna go ahead and flip this back over to get to the high pressure line and everything that needs to get added for that. I would suggest installing the boost pressure gauge on this first, because this fitting here doesn't spin. So to install this, you're gonna have to spin this entire cable. And honestly, it's such a tight spot that it might become a little bit frustrating and annoying. I'm gonna put a little bit of power steering fluid on this. It has an O-ring as well, so you do not need Teflon tape on this side. Run this all the way. As you see from this, this is 3 foot-pounds. The bolt up top takes 2 foot-pounds. So literally we're gonna go to tight, and then we'll tighten it a little bit further down once we get this installed in the car. So just add a little bit of power steering to that and you should be fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and work this through here. Set this in. And it just drops right in like that. And then the factory high pressure line, you can work this in and just slide them all in. So the new bolt is a T6. So we're gonna go ahead and position these two the right way and slide the bolt in. We're gonna go ahead and literally just give it a little bit. Give it a little bit of a tug, and that's it. All right, now I'm gonna come back and we're gonna tighten this one down. So again, remember this is 3 foot-pounds, so you just want it tight. It's not gonna be anything to be there. That's it. Done. All right, so with that said, we have the high pressure connected now. You have the sandwiched with the sandwich fitting with the boost gauge hanging right here. Okay, we have already added the bottom bolt pressure, the new spring along with the new bolt for that. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit the power steering pump back into place. And there you go. This is why we cut this out, so it would clear. As you see now, it doesn't hit. It definitely would have hit if we had not cleared that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this up from underneath. This is pretty much done. Now we just gotta run the lines and the cooler. All right, so once you've bolted everything up, you're gonna wanna pretty much get your harness again. You're gonna wanna run it back up and through. All right, make sure they're forward. And then slide the locking pins for them. And now you can actually put the 2 bolts from underneath and you don't have to move this again. We're gonna grab the 2 long bolts again and just slide them in through underneath. Alright, so we have the top side completely done. Harness is in. The new sandwich fitting for the boost gauge is in, and it's bolted in. We put the Venturi tube, or whatever you want to call this, back in. And that you pretty much just bolt back in with these two screws right here, and then don't forget to put this bar back into where it belongs. So now what we need to do is go to the driver's side and remove the final piece of the old low pressure line. And the way we're going to do that is actually by going in here along the driver's side. And if you notice, the actual hose is right there in front of us. It's the one that's moving. And we're actually going to cut right above this. If you want, cut flat up against it, but we just need to cut here. Because the top part's going to get reused, but the bottom part is going in the garbage. Alright, so you could use many different things. You could use a pair of scissors, a box knife, a pipe cutter. Alright, so that's the final piece to cut out. You're pretty much left with just the hose that you can see right here. And that's the hose that you're going to use to reconnect with the barb fitting that's applied with Apex. Apex does supply you with some general instructions on installing it, where, and the size of the bolts and stuff like that. But again, it's going to be dependent on what your setup is. So not necessarily will that work for you, but it's a good start for you to, be able to see. So I'm going to set the camera down and try to figure this out, and I'll try to show you guys as much as possible. The way Apex tells you to do this, you have one bracket on one side. They're both different brackets, so make sure you set them up the right way. The wolf will be facing up, and you have the one bracket that is singular on the driver's side, and then you have the bracket that is on both sides on the passenger side. And the way that they're talking about this, it tends to rest on these brackets here, which may just work out for me. So you want to make sure that you're sitting flush up against everything. You're going to want to make sure that your holes in the back, the hole for the actual line clears. And I'm thinking maybe I'll pre-install those right now just to see them, because you have one here and you have one down here. Let me go ahead and get those. This is the actual barb fittings. So we want to make sure we have clearance all the way around for all of this. This side, the passenger side, you're going to have to mount through the bracket. So you got to make sure that the bracket is on when you go ahead and put it in. And this one, it's a simple, you can put it in after or before. It doesn't really matter from the bracket, because the bracket is only on the front side. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. I want to make sure that I will clear my winch and I am not hitting anything underneath or on the backside. So I think this is the perfect place for it. Again, you're going to want to make sure the barb fitting is okay. It's not hitting anything. Same thing with the fitting down here. You want to make sure it's clear and not being blocked by anything. And from what I see, that's perfect there. So I wanted to install the winch so that way you guys could see, or not install it, but at least place it. So actually I'm going to have a lot of gap, which is actually pretty great. I think that's going to be the final mounting position for it. As you guys can see, the winch is actually pretty spaced out. It's spaced out from the back side of the condenser, or the front side of it, and all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these holes so I can start drilling them. So I'm going to use the bottom, the bottom long grooved hole here, and the big hole right here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and drill the two holes. I already marked off where I need to. We're going to start off with a small bit for the pilot hole, and then we're going to use the 1/2-inch drill bit after that. and we're through. Both holes are done. All right, so both holes have been drilled. One of the things that I would tell you to do now is grab your paint pen, whatever may it be, and spray paint or paint the holes so that way there's no rust or anything going in. Remind yourself to paint the ones on the outside as well. All right, so it's nice and dry. Time to install the oil cooler. So the way this works is washer on the outside. The nuts are serrated so that way they catch. Thank you, Apex. That's great. So let's go ahead and slide one side in. Find the hole. Slide the bolt in from this side. So we're going to slide these over. Just a hair. I need to be able to clear that top nipple on this little bracket that's here. You can't really see it. It's going to be hard for me to show you. But there's a bracket with a bolt that holds your AC condenser to your radiator. You need the nipple to the left of that. So that means that you need to bring this as far over without touching the bolt. It's literally maybe 1/8 of an inch. Once you have that there, then that's the perfect spot. Then you can lift it and tighten the bolt up for it. And the oil cooler's on. What's the only thing left now is really just to run the lines, which is the rubber hose that they give you with the actual hose clamps, and I'll do that now. We're gonna run one line from here to a double-ended nipple that Apex supplied, and then over here it's gonna go from this nipple straight to the power steering pump. Okay, so that's really it. Here are the hose clamps that Apex supplied us with. They're pretty much the factory clamps. Here is the double-ended barb that they give us. This is the one on the driver's side from that hose that we cut previously. We're going to slide one end in, and then this end will go into here, and then we'll connect it to this barb end here. Then once you cut the hose, the remainder of the hose you're going to use for the passenger side. You're going to connect it to the barb here, and then connect it to the barb on the steering pump. All right, guys. So the night took me a little bit longer yesterday, and kind of darkness caught me, and then it started to rain. So I had to quickly do a few things and not record them while I was doing them. Pretty much, I wanted to make sure that the system was sealed, so no water could get in or no bugs or dirt overnight. So just a real quick recap. So Apex Designs supplies a barbed fitting, a double-ended barbed fitting, and that's the one that you use here on the line that you cut on the driver's side. Then you take the hydraulic line they supply, just attach it to that, and then you run it. Give yourself a little bit of extra line, and then that one connects to the barb fitting here. And then over here, really, all it was just attaching the barb fitting to the backside. And then I pretty much ran it from underneath, and I followed the same line as you'll be able to see from up here. I followed the same line as the factory barb fitting. So let me put this the right way. And then here you can see it right here, and it's going right into the bottom of the power steering pump. I am going to zip tie these two lines together so that way they're consistently next to each other. There's really nothing in the way down there to get it, so that's perfect. And so with that, the only thing really left to do The only thing really left to do now is jack it up, put jack stands underneath it, and then bleed the system, and then we will be able to do the final pressure setting. And as you guys can see, here's the gauge already installed. So yeah, so I'll see you guys in a second. All right, so in the meantime, compressor's already done, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the entire airbox system back on because we're gonna have to turn the car back on once we start to set the pressure. So I want to have that all connected. And the front grille is installed. So I'm going to take you over here. So the front grille is installed. You can see the oil cooler down there. Hopefully you can see the gap. So there's about, I would say about maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch to an inch of gap all the way across. And that's perfect. So nothing's really going to hit it. Now that I have all that connected and the sensors are connected on the intake system, I'm going to go ahead and start jacking it up so that way I can bleed it and then set the pressure. All right. All right, time to bleed the system. Now that we got the wheels off the ground, we're going to go ahead and add the fluid. So I picked up a liter can of CHF 11S, which is also recommended by Apex. You could use this or the Mopar power steering fluid. Pretty much what you need to have is a fully synthetic power steering fluid. Let's go ahead and crack this open. Now we're going to fill the bottle little by little. We don't want to overfill it, as we will need to make sure that once the system is 100% bled, it's below the line, the cold minimum start line. You don't want to have too much over that line because this is a pressurized system, so too much fluid can cause damage. Add some fluid to this. Now, since it is going to take a lot, I'm going to fill the reservoir on the first time. And then as we go further, I'll be filling it less and less to make sure that I end up below the cold max line. So, filled that enough for now. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the steering wheel left to right, not all the way at the beginning, just enough to start getting the fluid moving. I'm doing this without turning the car on. Remember, we do have the boost pressure set, so we need to bleed the system first. All right, it continues to go down. I'm going to keep turning here, and we'll keep bleeding it. Alright, the bottle's about halfway down. I'm going to refill it again so I can keep going. I'm going to top it off. And then I'm going to go back and keep turning the wheel. Alright, how far has it gone down? It's gone down a lot. Let's top it off again. Another thing that you want to do while you're doing this bleed is to go ahead and check all the new hoses. Make sure everything, is not leaking. Everything is sealed. Make sure the oil cooler is not leaking, or the hose connection on the driver's side that we cut, that we added, or on the passenger side. Go ahead and check it again. Fluid's gone down. It's going. Alright, let's test the level of the fluid. We'll probably need to re-add some. You want to make sure that you keep this always filled, so that way you don't pull more air into the system. So I'm going to start doing halfway fills now, since we are getting to the bottom of this. And One thing I will tell you, when you first start bleeding it and turning the wheel, don't go to full lock right off the start. Go gradually. You know, do 10, 15 degrees to each side, and then just keep gradually going further and further until you get to the full lock. And then just keep going in full lock. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set the pressure. So my buddy Lewis is going to go ahead and turn the car on. And then we're going to see what it's set at. He's going to turn the wheel full lock. And then we'll see that the pressure is. He'll turn off the car, and then we'll adjust it a quarter turn at a time. All right, so we just did a quarter turn adjustment, so he's going to turn the car back on. And then turn the wheel. All right, so we're still under 1,000. Go to the other side. All right, guys, there you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and be hiding this. You can leave this on the car if you want. I'm going to leave it on because I'd like to see and monitor it for a couple of days, especially after I bled the system and everything. Just making sure that nothing gets backed out or there's no issues. So I'm just going to go ahead and zip tie this up out of the way so that way it's protected and whatnot. Typically, you'd slide this behind your inner fenders if you had the stock ones. So the bumper's on. You guys can see the oil cooler's right behind it. Some of you might say, well, that kind of defeats the purpose because, you know, you have a winch in front of your oil cooler, but if you had a bumper, you'd have it as well. At the end of the day, air comes in, forces down and goes through it. Air comes down on this side, goes through it, and it'll keep it cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up the bumper, finish installing my bumper back in, and that's really it. Thanks for watching, guys, and leave me any notes, comments, whatever you want in the bottom. Appreciate anything. This is obviously my first video doing any kind of install or review. I will have a follow-up once I have a few days of driving it, seeing how it reacts on the road, and I will follow that up with a separate video. All right, so thank you very much and have a great day, guys.